Welcome everyone to Skeptic Haven. Today our guest is Dr. Kipp Davis, who is a Hebrew Bible scholar who specializes in the Dead Sea Scrolls and Second Temple Judaism. His expertise is on ancient scribal practices. He has a PhD in theology from Manchester University, and he was on the team who uncovered forgeries in the Dead Sea Scrolls antiquity market. Let's do this.
Make a decision, and you make a rule. Make a spike just to be one that's gone too far. Come on, people, let me hear you say, you bastards gonna pay.
Yeah. I love the new intro.
Oh, it makes me so happy every time. Hi, guys.
You're so special when you get your own intro on almost every show you go on.
Well, whenever David's hosting,
That's true.
I was so sick last week, and we were talking about it, and I was like, "Oh wait, I've got to do this," and I was like coughing and sneezing at the desk and like trying to get like the export out to Wes, and Wes put that together. So yeah, I just had to do it.
It's
awesome.
So good.
Yeah. Awesome.
So Kipp, we're super excited to have you here today. We have some big questions.
Really big.
And because you're an expert in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so I guess the first thing we should start with, Stacey, is like what are the Dead Sea Scrolls? Can you give the audience an overview about what they are? Are they in the Bible? Is that what we're talking about? Are they not in the Bible? What are the Dead Sea Scrolls?
Are they in the Bible? I wish I still have my hard cover copy of the Dead Sea Scrolls Bible. But you guys should. That's a book you guys should get. Especially, I know you're keenly interested in a lot of this Bible stuff, David. That's a good one for you. The Dead Sea Scrolls Bible is an English translation of a pile of the so-called biblical scrolls, all the texts from the Dead Sea Scrolls that were copies of books from the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy, Kings, Isaiah, Psalms, all that stuff. So, But so what are the Dead Sea Scrolls? They are early Jewish manuscripts that date between roughly 200 BCE to 70 CE, the destruction of the Jerusalem temple. They were found in a place called Qumran in 11 caves that are within a 1.5 kilometer radius of the ruins of this settlement. And scholars have basically decided, the consensus is that there was a group of ascetic Jews who lived at this site, known as Essenes, who were basically waiting out, biding their time and waiting for the end of the world. And they collected and probably copied and maybe even wrote piles and piles of texts. So when the Romans came and sacked Jerusalem and then destroyed the temple, they came down south and then marched along the western shore of the Dead Sea toward Masada, which was where the last of the rebels were holed up. And on their way, they took a little pit stop at Qumran and demolished it, and then continued on and finished the First Jewish War. So that ended the settlement at Qumran, and they saw the Romans coming. So the thought is that a lot of these caves contained these caches of manuscripts that people were hiding with the expectation that they were going to come back and collect them, but they probably all died. So, now, why
That's
are the
cool.
Dead Sea Scrolls so important?
Mhm.
I'm glad you asked. I will tell you.
Yeah.
You took the
I will
words
tell
right out
you.
of our mouth.
This is the best interviewing Kip because he just
just-
interviews himself. It's great. You just sit back and
Right?
listen.
You supply the heavy metal intro. I'll do the rest. So, the Dead Sea Scrolls are hugely significant for the study of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament,
Mhm.
for the study of early Judaism, and for the study of Christian origins.
Okay.
Because within the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have our very earliest copies of any texts that appear in the Old Testament. Now, just to give you kind of a sense of what we're talking about here, prior to the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls,
Mhm.
the oldest complete copy of the Old Testament in Hebrew was in two manuscripts known as the Leningrad Codex and the Aleppo Codex. And
Okay.
these date to the 10th century CE. The Dead Sea Scrolls date between 200 BC and 70 CE. So you're talking about manuscripts that are almost 1,000 years or more than 1,000 years older.
Wow.
So this was huge. This was huge when they were first discovered in 1947. And what's really significant also is just the size
Mhm.
of the collection. So we're talking about tens of thousands of individual fragments from manuscripts. Scholars have spent almost 100 years now just trying to piece these things together and to understand what's there. And we tend to think that these fragments represent somewhere between 550 and 600 individual scrolls, individual
Oh
books.
wow.
About 230 to maybe 300 of these were individual copies of texts that we know from the Bible, individual copies of whole books, like the whole book of Isaiah, individual copies of sections. Like I spent some time recently on a couple of other streams talking about a really important manuscript. It's identified as a copy of the book of Deuteronomy,
Mhm.
but it's actually just a copy of what's called the Song of Moses, which appears in Deuteronomy 32, and that's the only thing that's in this
Huh.
manuscript. It's like its own copy of there
There's
are copies of you know varieties of collections of psalms, all sorts of different
Wow.
ones.
I remember from my ministry college education that the Dead Sea Scrolls codified and kind of proved the Bible's inerrancy. Like it showed that nothing had ever changed in the Bible, that it was all perfect.
Yes.
Yeah, and is that true?
So I mean, I suppose if you take a very selective view of what's there, like if you pick and choose from a handful of the manuscripts in the Dead Sea Scrolls, then you probably could make that claim. Problematically, though, one of the things that scholars did discover as well was that there are multiple copies of individual books and parts of books. For example, there are 31. Sorry, this is better. There are 22 copies of just the book of Isaiah, like scrolls containing the book of Isaiah. 22 copies.
Wow.
Now, there's the thing about it. Some of them look really, really close to the Hebrew text that survived in the Leningrad Codex and the Aleppo Codex that our English translations, our English Bibles are translated from. But a whole bunch of them are also quite different. And a number of English Bible translations have actually been updated to reflect some of the discoveries in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I am actually just going to pull up an example if I can do it. If I could do this quickly, if not, then we're gonna abandon ship quickly. But if I can
Okay.
if I can remember the reference, is it Second Samuel? No, not second. It's First Samuel 11. Let's see. Apparently there is no 21st Samuel in the Bible. So,
24.
all right. Oh,
Okay.
yes. So here we go. This is and let's go to the NRSV here. Let's see. 11:7, 11:8, 11:9. Shoot, I wish I could. I'm sorry, I
That's
didn't
okay.
have this.
You kind of just
I
thought of
didn't
that
have
right
this. So,
now. So
I was going to say in some English translations of 1 Samuel chapter 11, this tells the story of Nachash, the king of the Ammonites,
Mhm.
who besieges Yabesh Gilead, and Saul, the newly appointed king of Israel, comes to rescue Yabesh Gilead. And there's this sort of cryptic reference in there about all the people being afraid of Nachash because they're going to lose an eye, and you
Right.
kind of look at the text and go, what the hell is going on? There's actually an entire paragraph, almost a full paragraph of explanatory material that appears in one of the copies of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which explains who Nachash was, where he came from, explains this barbaric practice that he used to have of gouging out the right eye of all the men in the places where he where he attacked, so that they couldn't pull the bowstring anymore. And it goes into all this detail. This is a section of the text that was lost at some point
wow.
along the way, right?
Mhm.
And it didn't appear in any of our copies of the Bible until 1947, when this manuscript from the Dead Sea Scrolls was discovered, and ta-da,
Wow.
we have it again. So
Whoa.
That's
yeah,
amazing.
so now, and I mean, there's a significant difference. Some of the differences that we see in the text are in my opinion, pretty important.
Mhm.
So one of the ones that I've talked about quite a bit, and if people don't know, I actually have a series of videos on my channel that goes into some detail about the Dead Sea Scrolls. One of the videos that I have. Okay, I'll talk about a couple different things. One of the videos I have talks about copies of the Book of Isaiah, and why the Dead Sea Scrolls are really important for our
Mhm.
understanding of the Book of Isaiah. As I mentioned, we have 22 copies. Perhaps the most famous of all the Dead Sea Scrolls is called the Great Isaiah Scroll. It's a complete, intact copy of the entire book from chapter 1 all the way through to the end of chapter 66. It's 22 feet long.
What?
Yeah.
Oh
I've
my gosh. Wow.
I actually, that is a manuscript that I actually got to go inside the vault at the Shrine of the Book in Jerusalem, and I worked on it with my like supervisors for a
Wow.
week. So we have this one completely intact copy of the Book of Isaiah. One of the things that's really interesting, there's a couple things that are really interesting
Yeah.
about it. So in the first place, when it gets to the end of chapter 33, now scrolls are made the way they're made. They're made out of leather, vellum. So the hides are tanned, and they're stretched out and turned into parchment, and
Mhm.
then they're cut. And someone will come along with like what's called a dry pen, which is just basically like a sharp nib, and they'll scratch margins in it to indicate, these are your columns. They might scratch some lines in it to keep your lines straight, and then you write on them, and then they stitch each of these individual sheets together. Each sheet usually has anywhere between 2 and 4 columns ruled on it.
Right.
So what we have is, in this scroll, this Isaiah scroll, when you get to the end of chapter 33, it also ends at the end of a sheet.
Okay.
And then at the very bottom, there's a whole blank space. It's like 3 lines are left totally blank. And the scroll ends. And then chapter 34 begins at the top of the next column. Now, this doesn't sound like a really big deal
Right.
until you take a look at what's going on in all the rest of not just the Dead Sea Scrolls, but all the manuscripts that we've discovered at Qumran, at Mudabara, at Masada, all these places, we see the same thing. Where there's when a scribe leaves a significant space like that on an individual manuscript, it always only means one thing.
Okay.
It means this is the end of one book, and now we're starting a new book.
Oh.
So we see this in the scrolls that contain the minor prophets. The 12 were collected together for a long time, and at the end of each book, there's usually not even 3 lines. It's usually just a blank line.
Okay.
And then the new book would begin. So what we have in this scroll is a clear demarcation between 2 works. And this aligns with the other physical evidence that we have at Qumran. Of those 22 copies, I think it's like 4 of them look like there were complete copies of the whole book of Isaiah, but all the rest of them were either copies of only the first half or only the second half of Isaiah.
Wow.
So what does that tell you? What does that tell you about what they thought of Isaiah?
Well, you're going to have to tell us.
Am I going to have to tell you?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I don't want to guess and be wrong, because I have a feeling.
Is it,
Well, David might know,
Yeah.
but
What are you going to say?
I have no idea. I'm just guessing.
Well-
Is it? Do they view it as 2 separate things?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that's what I
Yes.
thought. And then Isaiah, like
Yes.
in our Bible, they just put it all as one.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Now,
Okay.
I don't know if you're now they're for a long, long time, for almost 200 years, scholars have theorized that the book of Isaiah is composed of different parts, right? Like there's a first Isaiah that was
Okay.
written in the 8th century, and then second Isaiah wasn't written until, the Babylonian exile. And then third Isaiah wasn't written
Okay.
until after the exile, and they were all put together. Now, we actually have some evidence from the Dead Sea Scrolls which shows, this probably happened. And we have the goods.
Well, this.
to
Sorry
show
to
this.
interject.
Okay.
Sorry to interject, but this plays right into the. Doesn't this play right into the wheelhouse of what the what apologists say when they say that everywhere else in Isaiah the suffering servant is Israel, sure, but in Isaiah 53 that's a different scroll or a different part, and that means Jesus.
Well, that's a different sort of argument. It doesn't because Isaiah 50, all the servant songs are part of what we call second Isaiah, so they're all written by the same person.
Okay.
Right, but so that's Isaiah. I'll talk about another of the biblical books that I get pretty excited about when it comes to the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that's the book of Daniel. Now, you have probably heard, David, you probably heard in ministry college that the Dead Sea Scrolls prove that the book of Daniel could not have been written as late as the 2nd century. For some reason, this gets thrown around like it's just, the copies of the book of Daniel at Dead Sea Scrolls. Oh my God, there's no way it could have been written in the 2nd century.
Yeah, can you explain the controversy first? Because like that might not mean anything to anybody. Like, who cares if it was written 2nd century?
Right.
Does Daniel say that it was written? Is it supposed to be written like yonks before that?
Yeah. So let's unpack this a little bit. The book of Daniel consists of 13 chapters. The first chapter is written in Hebrew. Chapters 2 through 7 are written in Aramaic, and then chapters 8 through 13 are written in Hebrew.
Wow.
Chapters 2 through 7 contain these stories about Daniel in the court of Nebuchadnezzar, right? Daniel in the lion's den,
Mhm.
Daniel in the fiery furnace. Well, not Daniel, but Daniel's,
Yeah,
Daniel's friends, the
Yeah.
Nebuchadnezzar's dreams, all that stuff. It's all written in Aramaic. And then chapters 7 through 12 are these freaky visions that Daniel has about the future, right?
Right.
And these are supposed to be like fulfilled prophecies.
Mhm.
So for a long time, scholars have looked at this and gone, this is super fishy. And it seems pretty obvious. There was once a collection of Daniel tales written in Aramaic. And maybe those date back, to, let's say, the Persian period, let's say 300 BCE or even 400 BCE. I'm being super generous here. Daniel was supposed to have lived in Babylon. So like 580 to 550, right?
Mhm.
But and the thought, the traditional idea is that Daniel himself wrote the whole book, which is kind
Well,
of
that's what I
funny.
was going to
Because
ask. If it's written in two
halfway.
different languages,
Yeah.
would that mean that it was written by two different people?
almost
Yeah.
certainly,
Okay.
because people in antiquity did not develop the kinds of skills that would be required to write like that in two
Right.
languages. This is
Yeah.
exceptionally rare. So not only that, though, but the Daniel tales, if you go back and you read them, they're all
Mhm.
written in the third person. Like there's a
Oh,
narrator.
Right. A
The
lot of
the visions,
yeah.
the visions of Daniel, the ones in Hebrew written in the later part, those are all in the first person. I, Daniel,
Oh.
had this vision of the angels standing on the banks of the river Kabar. So right away it's kind of on the nose. You've got these
Mhm.
Aramaic texts written in the third person. You've got these Hebrew texts written in the first person. Come on,
Right.
these are totally different. So scholars have noticed this. They've known this for a long time, and they saw, okay, all these things have been put together. Somebody has edited this larger work
Mhm.
that we call the Book of Daniel. And over time, it all got attributed to this one guy,
Right.
Daniel. So when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, there were eight copies of the Book
Okay.
of Daniel. This was thought significant for some reason by some Christian apologists, because the way this thinking goes is there's no possible way that Daniel could have been written in the 2nd century and then already in the 1st century BCE be considered authoritative enough to be, passed around, copies passed around. It's just
Right.
not enough time. I don't know why people keep putting that out there like that's a meaningful argument, because
Right.
it's not.
Yeah.
It's
Wow.
just not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's just put that to
to
bed.
I was going to say, put that to bed. So, how did you get go ahead. Were you going to say something else?
I was going to tell you
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
there's something really, really cool about the manuscript copies of the Book of Daniel.
Mhm.
We see the same sort of thing happening as we see in the Book of Isaiah.
Okay.
We have individual copies of the Book of Daniel that are just the Aramaic tales. We have individual
Okay.
copies of the Book of Daniel that are just one or a couple of these Hebrew prophecies. And then we have a bunch of other Aramaic texts that feature stories about Daniel that didn't make it into our Book of Daniel.
Oh. Wow, that's
Yeah.
fascinating.
So it looks like, I mean, what we draw from this is, it looks like there was a whole, like a genre
Mhm.
of literature that was, Aramaic tales of Daniel. They all sort of they all feature the same characters. They all sort of follow the same script of
Mhm.
oh, those stupid Babylonians always messing up.
Yeah.
And Daniel and his buddies have to come in and save the day. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
that's the Dead Sea Scrolls.
That's the Dead Sea Scrolls. We have a question here from Aaron Coalson. Other than Daniel, are there other books of the Old Testament that are written in a language other than Hebrew?
there are portions of other books that are also written in Aramaic. The most Aramaic in the Hebrew Bible in the Old Testament by far is in the book of Daniel, but there's parts of the books Nehemiah and Ezra
Mhm.
that also contain sizable chunks that are written in Aramaic. There's a few other places, like small sections in second Kings, I believe, where it will report correspondence or a speech, small statement from someone in Aramaic, and the text actually says, Shalmaneser answered in Aramaic,
Oh,
and then
okay.
it's actually written like that. That's the funny thing about the book of Daniel. I'm just gonna mention
Yeah.
this one more thing. You remember how I said the first chapter is written in Hebrew,
Yeah.
and scholars tend to think this was added, quite a bit later as sort of like an introduction to the whole collection now. So they wrote it in Hebrew, and then when they got to this first story in chapter 2 about Nebuchadnezzar's dream, it's Hebrew, 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 all the way up to that, and then it says, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and he was really upset, so he called his advisors to him, and he said to them in Aramaic, and then it repeats what he says in Aramaic, but then it never switches back to Hebrew.
Oh my gosh. That's hilarious.
It just continues in straight Aramaic for another 5 straight chapters.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's hilarious.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, how did you get interested in the Dead Sea Scrolls? Like, what was that moment or
So kind of by
what
accident,
happened? Yeah.
actually.
Okay.
I spent a year after high school, after I got married, I spent a year in Bible college
Mhm.
with the intention of going into the ministry. And the Bible school that I attended was way too warm and fuzzy for my taste. So I
Okay.
transferred
Yeah.
into one of those more reformed kind of schools where
Oh, I
the
know nothing
where the
about that.
where the theology, the have you ever seen like the theology bro dudes, the guys with the
Mhm.
giant beards on
Mhm.
YouTube, where it was that kind of a school. So
David's like, wait, what are you saying?
David would be a perfect theology bro dude.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah,
but
I have a beard to hide my chin's line. So it
You have
changes
a
the shape of my
great
face.
beard.
Look at
it is a great beard.
It's a
my
great
face is more round than what it looks like.
Oh, David.
Yeah.
So I transferred into this other school, which was on the campus of Trinity Western University
Mhm.
in Langley, British Columbia.
Yes, BC represent.
Yes. Yes. So they cross-listed a whole bunch of courses with the university, and I was really interested always in
Mhm.
doing Greek and Hebrew. So
Okay.
I did all my I enrolled right away in my introduction courses for Greek and Hebrew. The year that I arrived was the same year that they launched the Dead Sea Scrolls Institute. Trinity had just added 2 new faculty members who are world-renowned Dead Sea
Mm.
Scrolls scholars, Professor Peter W. Flint and Professor Martin G. Abegg, who's still a really good friend of mine. He actually lives just 10 minutes away from me
Oh,
here.
cool.
Yeah. So, and he was my MA thesis supervisor too. So I didn't know anything about the Dead Sea Scrolls before I arrived at Trinity, but with the launch of the Dead Sea Scrolls Institute, you can imagine in like the program in the department, it played a big role. And I would have language classes with Professor Flint, and he would like this is way back before before modern technology, when
Okay.
you used to have to use the photocopier for everything. So he would photocopy pictures of like individual manuscripts from the Dead Sea Scrolls for
Mhm.
us to work through and translate, which was super
Wow.
fun. But that's kind of where it started for me.
Mhm.
And I went into it as well with the anticipation that I could do work in two worlds that I love. The first being the text of the Hebrew Bible, the text of the Old Testament. The Dead Sea Scrolls are our oldest copies of the text of the Hebrew Bible, and there's lots there to work through. And the other world that I was intensely interested in was the world of early Christianity and the development and the emergence of Christianity and the parting of ways between the church and early Judaism. So
Right.
the Dead Sea Scrolls,
Mm.
in addition to our oldest sources for the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, the Dead Sea Scrolls also provide indispensable, important background information
Mhm.
about the culture and religion of the early Jews at the time of Jesus.
Right.
So
something that still blows my mind, and I made that short
Beatitudes.
for my channel. Yeah, the Beatitudes. Like
Yes.
you mentioned, you just dropped that on me. Like
Okay,
so
I
talented
remember
sequence.
that was during your live stream, like, last spring,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I remember when watching that, and that blew my. Can you share that just in
Yeah.
case? Yeah.
Let me see if I can just pull up the text quickly. So for people, just I'm bad
That
at
was
doing this
such
on the
a
fly, guys. I'm
mind-blowing
sorry.
moment.
So there are the Beatitudes in the New Testament. This is in the Gospel of Matthew. 4Q 525 is a manuscript. Okay. So famously, it's part of this great sermon delivered by Jesus on the Mount of Olives. I think it's the Mount of Olives, isn't it? But anyways, it follows this: blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek, blessed are all these people. Blessed are the cheese makers. So and for a long time, I mean, a lot of people have pointed to this as this tremendously innovative teaching of Jesus, right? Well, we discovered a manuscript from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it's a Hebrew manuscript. That's the other thing I'll mention quickly. There's hundreds of copies of manuscripts in the Dead Sea Scrolls. About 150 of them are Aramaic, and the rest are written in Hebrew. So there's a lot of Aramaic literature there. This one's Hebrew, but it was given the designation Beatitudes, and I'll think you understand why when I read it to you. So it starts. They're fragments, right? So we don't have everything. So it starts in the middle of a sentence, and it starts like this: with a pure heart and does not slander with his tongue. Blessed are those who hold fast to its statutes and do not hold fast to the ways of injustice. Blessed are those who rejoice in it and do not exult in the paths of folly. Blessed are those who seek it with pure hands and do not search for it with a deceitful heart. Blessed is the man who attains wisdom and walks in the law of the Most High, establishes his heart in its ways, restrains himself by its corrections, is continuously satisfied with its punishments.
Wow.
So, and it goes on from there, but what this tells us is a couple of things. It tells us in the first place that this is a rhetorical style.
Right.
This is something that's more widely common, that
Okay.
Jesus didn't make up, but Jesus or the New Testament writers knew. And it also firmly situates them within, an early Palestinian Jewish milieu.
Okay, because I was going to ask, I know I was going to ask you two questions. First one was
Mhm.
going to be, was there anything about the book of Enoch in the Dead Sea Scrolls? And the second was going to be, because I know that there's a lot of references in the New Testament, especially in the Gospels, to the book of Enoch. So would
Mhm.
there be any relationship to the Beatitudes being, because isn't that in the book of Enoch? So would there be a connection with that in
Yeah.
the Dead Sea Scrolls? Do you kind of see where I'm going with
So,
that?
yeah, I do. I
Okay.
do.
Wait, the Beatitudes are in the Book of Enoch?
There's
Well-
something like
well,
it
there's a lot
Oh.
in the
of
Book of Enoch too.
there's a lot
Similar
of
stuff. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
crossover.
Overlap.
Did you
I
not
was
watch
sick
last
last
week's
week.
episode?
Yeah, I was sick last week. I
It
was
was-
sick. I was meant to host. I
I'm
was
just
sick. I'm
joking.
sorry.
David was delirious. He was like, he
Oh.
doesn't
Teasing.
remember.
You know I love you.
So-
Okay. Anyways.
So, yes, one of the other really exciting things that we found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So, the Book of Enoch.
Mhm.
We've known about it for a very long time, but only, through translations. We have copies of the Book of Enoch in Ethiopic, in Coptic, in Slavonic, in Greek. And for a long time, scholars were pretty certain that it was originally written in Aramaic.
Okay.
We actually have several copies of Aramaic Enoch in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Oh wow.
Yeah, which is really
That's
it's really
fascinating.
exciting. So it was a very popular text among the writers and collectors of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it's actually it's developed. A number of scholars have developed quite a few theories about Enoch relative to the people there. I don't have a ton of. I don't think this is probably the direction we should go, but I'll just mention it.
Mhm.
So one of the thoughts is that this community that lived at Qumran
Mhm.
had split away at some point in 200 BC from a group of Jews that was actually competing. They were like a group of priests that were competing with like the established priests in the Jewish temple, in the Jerusalem temple, what we would call the sons of Aaron, the Aaronic priesthood. And the idea is that there was this group of priests that didn't necessarily identify themselves with Aaron, but more so with Enoch or with Levi. And they had their own little collection of scriptures in the Book of Enoch. One scholar by the name of Gabriele Boccaccini, he's in Italy.
Yes.
He actually promoted this idea, and I think there's some traction there. I don't buy everything, but he promotes this idea that the Book of Enoch actually functioned like a competing Torah to the Mosaic Torah.
Yeah.
And he distinguishes between these two factions of Enochic Judaism and Mosaic Judaism.
Kind of like one up each other in a way, like that's.
Well, they're sort of they're in competition with each other.
Yeah.
Another group, right, similar to
Yes.
the Samaritans, who were a group of Jews that had separated themselves from Jerusalem, were worshiping on Mount Gerizim and have their own scriptures, the Samaritan Pentateuch. It's the idea was that this could just be another faction among these several factions of Jews that we already know about. One of the interesting things, and maybe this is a good place to transition and talk a little bit about forgeries, but one of the so I mentioned that we knew.
Sorry, hang on a second.
Yeah.
Hang on. Let me. So Kipp, you got very interested in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and then you went on to discover forgeries in the antiquities market. Tell us a little bit about that.
What a great question, David. I was wondering the same thing.
What a seamless segue. Thank you.
Well done.
Very
Dave.
good. Yes. This is why you guys wanted me. This is
I know, right?
expertise that I have.
You're fulfilling your mandate. So, the Aramaic copies of Enoch that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls were the first, and as far as I know, the only Aramaic copies of the Book of Enoch. But they're fragmentary, right? They're not complete. The editor of these manuscripts was a brilliant scholar by the name of Joseph Milik. He was from Poland. And what we do as scholars when we're working on the fragments is we'll transcribe them, meaning we'll look at what's there and put them into a recognizable typological Hebrew or Aramaic, and then provide a translation. Quite often, if we know the text, we'll be so bold as to even suggest what might be in the places where the text is missing, in what we call the lacunae, or the gaps. So Joseph Milik looked at the Slavonic and the Ethiopic and the Greek copies of Enoch and used these basically to retrovert back into Aramaic and fill in the gaps. Now, the versions are all quite different. So, he was exercising a lot of editorial license in doing this. But he's like super brilliant. So,
Right.
who am I to say? So, when I was, well, I'll just go back in 2011, 2012, 2011. Yeah, 2011. I accepted a position in Norway, working at the University of Exeter, and one of my primary responsibilities while there was to help a team to publish fragments from a private collection of the Dead Sea Scrolls in just outside of Oslo, belonging to a gentleman by the name of Martin Skoyen.
Okay.
And he had 3 fragments that were copies of Enoch. My good friend Orstein Usness was tasked to work on these 3 fragments, and he was using Milik's monumental edition to work through these. And he discovered, as he's going through them, that these fragments filled in places of Milik's transcription where he was guessing, right? He's retroverting from the Greek and the Ethiopic and the Slavonic back into Aramaic. Well, here we had fragments that actually contained the missing text.
How
wouldn't
big
you know
are
it?
these fragments? Just out of
They're
curiosity.
small. They're like this
Okay,
big.
like a
At the
credit
biggest.
card
Some of them.
Yeah. Oh.
Some of them are like the size of a dime.
Oh, wow.
The largest one that Skoyen has is this big.
Oh my
So
goodness. Okay.
there's not a lot there.
Yeah.
And he paid a small fortune for them. So
Okay.
individually, these things were selling for tens to hundreds of thousands
Oh
of
my
dollars.
gosh. Okay.
So this was exciting though. And my friend Orstein kept telling me, he's like, Milik was such a genius. I can't believe that he guessed this stuff correctly with such precision and accuracy. And it took a little while before we started to think, wait a minute, how did he do that?
Right.
Is that even possible to make such an accurate guess as to, the original text based on a translation? So this started for us. There were other features within these fragments which strongly suggested to a bunch of us that these fragments that Martin Skoyen owned, many of them looked like they possibly could be forgeries, not authentic fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I can actually, maybe now's a good time. I can just show you a little bit about what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Here.
Well, as you bring that up, let's just shout out a few peeps in the chat. It's great to see everyone here. Captain Dadpool, Pragmatic Crystal, Kate Humanist, Tux TV.
I
Who else
can-
is here?
We had also Dan D, Canadian Ollieman. I saw, hold on. Oh, Ember,
D.
Pat Lowinger. I think I got it. Oh, Aaron Coalson. My mom.
Hi, Stacey's mom.
Yeah.
Stacey's mom's got it going. That's going to be in my head.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share and do all those wonderful things that help our channel. Okay, here we go.
I'll show you a
Matthew
few
B.
things
Hi.
here.
Oh, and Matthew.
What I called indications of probable forgery when I first made this presentation back in 2016 in Norway. So one of the things that we saw on a lot of the fragments, these fragments in private collections, are what I called bleeding letters. So these are letters that had ink marks that were spilling out of where the pen was making the mark, and this is unusual compared to virtually all the other manuscripts that we knew from the authentic Dead Sea Scrolls. I'll show you some examples here, and it shouldn't matter. You shouldn't need to actually be able to read the letter, like the letters, to see what I'm getting at, but you can sort of see on the edges of some of these there's little splinters of ink that spill out, right? It's very sloppy. So here's a few more. So these are all fragments from the Museum of the Bible collection. Like you can see where it looks like the ink is spilling and pooling, and it's not adhering neatly to the surface. You can see little spines of ink that stick out. Yeah. So this is unusual. This was a good indication to us. There's lots on this one that these are probably, this could indicate that these are not authentic. Something else that we noticed are misaligned text. You'll notice these are tiny fragments, a line to maybe 3 or 4 of text. And what we see usually, you write text in parallel, your lines, but what we see, you'll notice that these lines are out of alignment. And in fact, what's happening on this fragment is it sure looks like the letters at the bottom of the fragment are actually someone's trying to sort of crowd them onto the edge. And we see this quite a bit. Here's another one where the letters are out of alignment. I think this is probably the most obvious one. So you can see these 2 lines here. You look how far off that is. Yeah. And again, this line that's at the top of the fragment sort of looks like somebody's just trying to get bits of the letters on the edge of the fragment. It doesn't look like the fragment deteriorated from a larger manuscript. All right. I talked about paleographic anomalies. I'll go quickly through this one because this is a bit more technical. But paleography is the study of handwriting in antiquity. And when I do my work as a paleographer, I look at individual letters on a single manuscript, and I usually make a chart to just get a sense of how an individual scribe is writing. We use paleography, by the way, to date manuscripts just based on handwriting styles. I sort of keyed in on this very strange looking letter Hey that has this really big bump that kind of hangs out on the left hand side here, and I saw like it on I saw it on a few of these different manuscripts, and it's not something I had ever seen before. And to my eye, I'm like, this really looks like somebody is trying to write this letter but doesn't really know how. So here, this letter here in red is these are all actually supposed to be the same letter. And they look pretty, they look all on the same manuscript, and they all look pretty dramatically different. This one on the far right here, you'll notice that I've highlighted it in red on the fragment. Yeah. And I think the reason it looks like that is because somebody had to write it around the hole
Yes.
that's already there. All right. So this is the kind of stuff. Here's another one. I mean, we know from context that this is supposed to be the letter Vav, this one on the right, but
Mhm.
you'll notice that that letter on the right doesn't really look anything like
Mhm.
the other letters there. So let's see what else. I've got a lot of these paleographic anomalies. I'll just skip through. That's supposed to be this tail on the right hand side here. I have no idea what that's supposed to be. These are all examples of the same letter
Oh my
on
god.
2 different manuscripts, and yeah, it's a mess. It
Wow.
really looks awful. Okay, scribal inconsistencies on the fragment edges. One of the things that we see is on the edges of fragments where somebody is pressed for space. It looks like the letters are kind of squeezed in,
Mhm.
and they're really tiny. Like you've got the top line, okay,
Yeah.
and then the second line. You'll notice that there's text running along the second line, and then a break, and then the line is supposed to continue, but the letters are tiny
Mhm.
and they're very high. It's pretty. We see exactly the same thing on this manuscript in the last line on the far right side. Look
Yeah.
at these
Oh,
tiny
yeah,
little
yeah.
letters that are sticking in the corner
Yeah.
here. What is that?
They're like, "Oh my god," and just use
Right?
that little space and
Yeah.
yeah. Wow.
All right.
How
So I've got a couple more of these. There's one thing in particular that I want to show you guys. I'm just going to get
Yeah.
there quickly. Variants. I won't go through. So I'll just say something quickly
Yeah.
about this manuscript. The one on the larger fragment on the bottom, that's an actual fragment from the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah, you can
So
tell the
that's
difference immediately.
right.
Well, not that I'm an expert, but after you showing us those and seeing that, I'm like, "Oh, that
You can
looks
see it, right?
genuine." Yeah.
You don't even need to know what you're talking about to be able to see it. So
Mhm.
this one on the top is a fragment that was purchased by the Azusa Pacific University. The amazing thing about it is this fragment on the top was copied directly from this authentic fragment on the bottom, because the text matches up line for line,
Oh, wow.
and they even copied a scribal error. And
Oh.
just so
Oh, no
My
there's
way.
a there's a word on this the authentic fragment that's misspelled.
Oh, I can see that. Yeah.
Uh,
Do you see the misspelled word? Because I saw it right away.
Did you
Yeah,
see it
yeah,
right
yeah,
away?
I
yeah.
Good
found
job,
them. Yeah,
guys.
I did. I was
I was
like,
like, straight away, I was like,
that's
oh, that's the
not
wrong,
correct.
I'm-
grammar as well.
I'm
Just-
I'm skipping over this one because this is too technical. But you don't know what's going on here, and don't worry about it. So,
Hey, I totally know what's
All
going
right.
on.
Yeah.
So I have to tell this story, and then we can move on. So this fragment here is a fragment from the book of Nehemiah, and it's a significant fragment because in the actual collection of Dead Sea Scrolls, the authentic scrolls, there are no copies of the book of Nehemiah.
Okay.
So the Museum of the Bible, who owns this fragment, was pretty excited about the fact that they had a copy of a fragment from the book of Nehemiah. Perhaps the only one, or maybe one of only 2 out there. So I spent some time. After I was working on the Scoian collection for a while, I was also asked to help with the collection of fragments belonging to the Museum of the Bible. So I had started working on these fragments, and I was working on this one, and I was really, really troubled by this particular fragment. So I've highlighted these letters in red. You can see
Mhm.
now from the right to the left, it's a Vav, an Aleph, a Shin, a Yod, a Bet. And then this little mark here that's right close to the break is supposed to be another Vav. The text at this point says Va'ashu Va'avo, and I sent and they came. Now, I had lots of problems with this because I'm like, the letter looks really small
Mhm.
And the person who was doing the work on this fragment tried to say, well, it's, the ink probably flaked off and it's abraded, it's broken. And I'm looking at it, I'm going, yeah, because I have color photos of these as well. I have these really huge files, which are called polytexture maps, which are actually, they're almost like 3D uh, 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 digital copies of individual
Okay.
fragments. And I'm like, it really doesn't look like it. And I can't figure out for the life of me what's going on here. It's just, it's puzzling. It's confusing to me. So I was in my office at work one day at the university, and I was working on something entirely different. When, I needed a copy of a Hebrew Bible to check something up,
Mhm.
and I didn't have mine in the office. So I ran upstairs to one of my colleagues, and he's an older guy, and he had like an old version of the Hebrew Bible, what's called the Kittle edition from 1937. So he lent me his copy, and I'm flipping through the pages to get to where I want to look at whatever it was I was looking at, and I happened past Nehemiah, and this caught my eye. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh my God. So this is what I saw.
Okay.
Here is a photograph from the page. Now, you can see I've lined up the letters,
Mhm.
one above the other. You
Yes.
can see, reading from right to left, the Vav, then
Mhm.
the Aleph, then the Sheen, then another Vav, then the Bet, and then this little letter here.
Yes.
In the printed edition, this is a Greek letter alpha, which corresponds to a textual note
Okay.
in the apparatus. So it's like a footnote in a printed edition.
Oh.
That little splotch on the left, very
Yeah.
very far left.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
okay.
that's what would
And
be like the footnote.
you can
Okay.
kind of see it now too,
Yes.
right? You can
Yep.
kind of
Mm.
see it looks almost exactly like it.
Mhm.
So it seemed obvious to me as soon as I saw this. I'm like, somebody didn't know what they were doing,
Yeah.
and they're carefully forging this fragment
Mhm.
and didn't know enough to know that that's not a Hebrew letter that was originally in the text.
Oh my gosh.
And so they just copied that along with it.
It's like if
And
Stacey and I tried to create forgeries.
That's right.
yes. So I
There
think
with like hot glue and textures.
perhaps the most astonishing thing in all of this is
Mhm.
just how long scholars were fooled
Yeah.
about this
Mm.
stuff,
But
because it was years,
yeah.
10, 15 years before the team I was working with caught onto this, and we started yeah, go ahead.
So I was gonna say, how did it feel to have these discoveries to it must have been a little bit of euphoria in a way,
Oh,
or
yeah.
just yeah, that is quite the discovery.
That's
So
like
there were
That's like Kip Jones, Indiana Jones kind of style.
two sides of this, okay? So yes, it's euphoric because
And
they're ideas that we've been developing for months and months, and as the evidence is kind of piling in. Like when I made that discovery, it was like
that's
one of those moments.
huge.
I was like running down the hall with my with my copy of the Hebrew Bible going,
Yeah.
"Ah!"
Oh my gosh, and the
But
fact that no one else saw that before that is
so
insane.
there's another side of this too, though.
Yeah.
Martin Scoyne is a private collector who has graciously allowed us to work on his extremely valuable collection
Right.
of fragments that he has paid hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars for.
Mm.
So the other side of this was having to inform Mr. Scoyne, I'm sorry, but we think most of your fragments are actually fakes, and
Oh,
you were
yeah.
duped. So I'll tell another quick story about this. When he had when we first approached him about this, before we came public with any of it,
Mm-hmm.
we suggested to him that he wanted proof, right?
Right.
You can't prove these things. You can
Okay.
make
Your
very
best
strongly.
educated guess. And I think
It's
that's what.
about probabilities, right?
Yeah.
And the plausibility of these things. So
Mhm.
we're working with a physicist in Berlin,
Mhm.
and he wanted her to develop some sorts of forensic tests for his fragments to see if they were authentic or forgeries. And she said, I need a control group. So if you could send out some fragments to test, but also something else that you have that's on the same medium, around the same age, then that we know was authentic, I can
Mhm.
test those as well. So he's got some Greek manuscripts from around the same period that are, known to be authentic. So
Mhm.
I was elected, because I was the postdoc, to courier this stuff out
Okay.
to Berlin for testing. So, and I was really nervous about it because, they're worth hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
So I a week, 2 weeks ahead of when I'm supposed to leave, I ask him, I'm like, okay, so do I need any special paperwork? Are they going to stop me
Mhm.
in customs? Like
Mm.
this feels like a big deal. He's like, oh no, just throw it in your carry-on. I was like,
Oh, wow. Are you
okay.
sure?
Yeah. Like
Wow.
he wrapped them up nicely,
Yeah, yeah.
but he's like, here you go. Just, and they're small, right? So the whole
Mhm.
package was like this. And I
Yeah.
did. I just threw it. I just put it in my carry-on.
I'd still be
I
so
arrived.
nervous.
It was
Yeah,
nerve-wracking, but it gets
yeah.
worse. I
Oh.
arrive in Berlin, okay,
Uh-huh.
and I'm supposed to drop this stuff off directly at the scientist's house, and she's giving me directions. She's like, get on the bus
Mhm.
and go to the train, and then take the train, and and then walk to my house, kind of thing. So I'm like, okay, look at the clock. I've got 10 minutes to catch the bus. So I run out to the platform to buy a ticket, and there's no place to buy a ticket. So I run back inside, and there's like a ticket counter. So I buy a ticket, and then I run back to the platform, and phew, I made the bus. I got on the
Okay,
bus. We
okay.
start going. I sit down. Do you know those moments you have when you've sat down and you're like, I feel like I'm missing
Oh,
something?
no. Oh, no.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
I think
And it did. It took me a few minutes, right? And
Oh,
I suddenly realized, oh my god, I do not have my carry on. So I run up to the bus driver. I'm in Germany, okay? I run
Uh-huh.
up to the bus driver, and my German is shit. It's terrible. I run up to the bus driver, and I say to him, "Excuse me, sir, can you please stop the bus? I have to get off."
Yeah.
And the guy just ignored me. Didn't even look at me.
Oh my god.
Staring straight ahead, driving the bus, and I'm feeling a sense of panic welling inside me, and I'm like,
Oh,
"Excuse
no.
me, stop the bus, please." I start getting really agitated. I start yelling, and he still would not even acknowledge me.
yeah.
So somebody, kindly noticed that I was in a state, so they told the bus driver to pull over and stop. So I did, and I had about a 1.5 kilometer run to get
Oh,
back to the
jeez.
airport, and I ran. You better believe I
Oh, yeah.
ran. And as soon as I got there, I was starting to think
Panic.
about, should I
Oh, no.
even bother going home? Should I just go back to Canada?
Oh,
Is he going to hire a
oh,
hitman to
jeez.
take me
Oh,
out?
gee.
I, I was
So was
like,
it there? It was
it was
there?
sitting at the ticket counter. It
Oh.
was just sitting there, and I was like, oh my god.
Oh
So
my gosh.
I had the same experience actually in Berlin when I got off. Like I was trying to
You
ask
left
people stuff.
like
And they were just
fragments of
Berlin,
the
right?
yeah. And I'm like, sorry, am I invisible? Like I felt like I stepped into another. Yeah. Yeah. It was wild.
Berlin's a funny place. It's a hoot.
It's so something that I found super interesting, and maybe we can wrap on this, but one of the things that you were in a documentary, the PBS Nova documentary, the special on the Dead Sea Scrolls, and
do you want to? Should I show part of it?
Yeah, if you want.
Okay. Someone was in the chat.
There's something to do with there was like some salt or something.
Oh yeah,
that blew me away.
Right. I wonder if I can find the salt clip. I've got something queued up here.
Okay.
If you're in another country other than the United States, you should be able to watch this on YouTube. If you're in the United States, I think you can watch it on PBS. It's called Dead Sea Scroll Detectives.
Dead Sea Scroll collection. Ancient artifacts do not have a barcode to tell you, bam, this is where it came from. And so there's various methods to determine whether or not any given artifact is in fact authentic.
The Museum of the Bible has hired a team of outside experts, including scroll scholar Kipp, to study their fragments.
There he is.
The hair's a little shorter.
But he's focusing on a handful that seem most suspect.
The fragment of Nehemiah from the Museum of the Bible collection
I just explained this.
Preserves a couple of verses.
Let's see if I can
from chapter 2. The word here, ashuv, is clear, and it's supposed to be followed by another word, va'avo.
At first glance, the fragment looks fine, but there's a strange mark next to one of the Hebrew letters.
Here,
we were all going to great pains to try and explain what was going on.
Oh, that's right. That's still.
Hold on a sec, guys. I'll get this back.
Okay, we just gotta wait.
It's great. It's an ad for streaming.
All right.
Yeah.
Here.
What we're using.
So this is the one that this is the story that David mentioned that I'll just
this blew me away. This is the smoking gun.
This was super fun.
Crystal has linked the.
There
PBS
you go. Thank you,
in the chat,
Pragmatic Crystal.
She's
all right,
always there for us.
Here we go.
Other fragments include a long-lost solar calendar, likely used by the Essenes.
All right.
Back at the Museum of the Bible, Kipp Davis is also relying on powerful imaging. He wants to uncover whether fragments that have recently reached the market.
Boy, the hair
fake.
was really short.
When Kipp looked at this fragment, owned by a Norwegian collector, he discovered a problem.
When some fragments have been sitting in the Judean desert region, in the neighborhood of the Dead Sea, lots of them have collected salt on the surface. And they look kind of cool and fairly random in shape. They look like these great big crystals from a distant planet or something, right? One of the fragments that we examined in Norway was really intriguing because it appears that somebody had attempted to mimic this on the fragment, but used table salt, which has a different chemical composition and appears much different underneath the microscope. When we examined the fragment under the microscope, it revealed a very even distribution of salt right across it, like someone had taken a salt shaker. Weird. This really was a smoking gun moment in the case of this particular fragment, that it could not have been produced in antiquity when there was no table salt.
And there was something else off about the fragment.
We saw ink not just lying underneath the particles of salt, but at high magnification, you can see ink has been applied right over top of some of the individual salt kernels. Ink is put on top of a table salted fragment is an indication that this was produced after the invention of table salt.
The evidence seems to...
That is crazy.
Wow. I'm going to watch that.
I'm surprised that like the forgers had the like capacity to think about putting salt.
So, David, I'm glad you bring that up, because one of the reasons it took so long for scholars to come around to thinking that these were forgeries was because we were all told, we had these well-worn modern myths, really, about the possibility of making convincing fakes. It was suggested that there's not enough raw material, like actual blank pieces of large enough to be able to do this. While most of them are really, really tiny. You would have to be an expert in textual criticism, as well as the history of the text. Although I think some of the things I've shown here demonstrate that's not necessarily the case. But even if it required this wide array of specialized skills, at the time, I think I had an advantage in that I was a postdoc working on this, because at the time I had dozens of colleagues who had spent, tons of money and many years in school working on, these very arcane skills, who couldn't get a job.
Wow.
I'm like, they're out there. I'm like, there's these people, they're just sitting out there. Maybe some of them have an axe to grind. Maybe some of them are frustrated by the fact that they spent so much money and can't get work in the thing that they're trained in. So a great scholar by the name of Christopher Rolston teaches at George Washington University. He's probably the most widely respected epigrapher in the world. And he wrote a couple of very important articles about forgery, about the forgery of antiquities. And one of the things that he pointed out was that we don't give forgers nearly enough credit. We tend to think they're too stupid to do this. We tend to think they're not paying, they're not paying attention to details, when this is just wishful thinking. The truth of the matter is, the forgers are probably one step ahead of us at every stage of this process.
Wow. That's actually quite true. Yeah. Wow.
And even here, right? Like, to have the foresight to think, I need to mimic the impression of a Dead Sea environment. And some of the mistakes made are like they're really understandable, because it's like there's if you can imagine, trying to write on something that's that big, that's already, it's a rough, unwieldy surface. You have to use like an ancient stylus, an ancient ink, to do this. It's not easy, right?
Do you think they've already like ripped the paper or whatever format they're writing on to that size, or do you think they've written on them already and then they rip it apart? Or
so what I think the fragments actually are, and this is, I've written about this in a few places. My theory are that these are pieces of leather, ancient pieces of leather, not necessarily parchments. Now, parchment is parchment is made of animal skins.
Not like the parchment we know in our kitchen parchment.
Yeah, probably not that. Not
No,
that.
okay.
So parchment is an animal skin, but it's been processed, scraped and stretched very thin. So it's not like, it's a different type of leather than what you would use for your shoes, or for a wineskin or a piece of clothing or something like that, right? So my theory was, because a lot of the fragments that we saw, which are forgeries, have these they don't look like parchment. They're all
Okay.
wrinkly and shriveled, and they're rough.
Mhm.
And that helps to explain why the writing on them looks so bad.
Oh, and
Hmm.
maybe
Because
lead too?
yes.
Okay.
So my theory was, I don't even think these are. I think they're ancient. Like
Mhm.
the medium. I think these are actual pieces of like Roman sandals or
Oh.
wineskins or satchels or what have you. People have picked up or bought or
Mhm.
found and thought, if I add some writing to this,
Mm.
it's going to be worth 100 times
Mm.
what it would be if I just and like to give you kind of a sense of what we're talking about here too, in terms of the numbers. The Azusa Pacific University, we have no idea how much Scoian spent on his
Right.
fragments, but Azusa Pacific University, um, they had to claim it on their taxes,
Okay.
and they bought 5 fragments and they spent 1.6 million US dollars.
Holy.
So we have reason to think that the Museum of the Bible spent a lot more than that. One of the sources for all of the fragments is an antiquities dealer in Jerusalem by the name of William Kando. William Kando is the son of Iskander Shaheen, who's otherwise known as Kando. He was the sort of the broker between. Most of the Dead Sea Scrolls were found by a Bedouin out in the Judean desert, and they would bring them to Kando's shop, and he would buy them, and then he was kind of like the middleman between them and the archaeologists and the scholars. So it's estimated that probably 95% of all the Dead Sea Scrolls passed through his shop.
Okay.
So William Kando is his son, and his story is that he's got these fragments that are sitting in a vault in Switzerland that he's selling just one at a time. So where was I going with that? Shoot,
The different, like the
oh
textures, the
yeah.
skin.
So I was talking about value now. So William Kando has a rather exquisite piece, and I believe this is an authentic fragment. It's about this big. Like it's a sizable piece. It's 3 columns from the Book of Genesis. It's been called the butterfly fragment because it's kind of shaped like butterfly wings. So in when Daniel Estrin wrote a story about the sale of Dead Sea Scrolls into private collections back in 2011, reported that the asking price for the butterfly fragment was $2 million
Oh wow.
at that
Whoa.
time. So within 4 or 5 years after I started working for the Museum of the Bible, I was told by the officers at the museum that when they approached Kando about purchasing the butterfly fragment, he told them it would cost $40 million.
Oh my god. 40 million.
That's
That's insane.
insane.
Wow.
That's insane.
And I suspect
Yeah,
we can't sell it now
No.
because of everything that's happened. But
Well,
the figures are obscene.
I have one last question as we wrap up the show,
Okay.
and that is, did the forger ever get caught? Do we know
No.
what happened to the person who forged them? Like, do you know who it was?
Sounds like it was.
I have-
Did he get his money back for the guy who bought them? Like, how?
No.
Like, yeah.
So we do not know who the forger is.
Mm.
I have my suspicions.
Ooh.
Oh.
Oh, next time Dr. Kipp is gonna
reveal.
No. And scholars, I mean, there's a few of us who on this stuff, and there's a collection of names that gets thrown around. It's always the same collection of names, but
I'm gonna privately call you.
He's like,
no. So yeah, we don't know who the forger is or was. We have suspicions. In terms of like where things are now, the Azusa Pacific University filed a lawsuit against the person that they bought their fragments from. He's a he's like a rare book dealer in California by the name of Lee Biondi. So I actually got subpoenaed to hand over like email and text correspondences.
Wow.
This is so juicy.
I know.
My lawyer told me I didn't have to comply with the subpoena, so I didn't. So but
will you show them to us? I'm just joking.
Are you gonna to us? Yeah, get me.
And you know what? Some of this stuff is like on a server somewhere that I probably don't even.
There's always stuff on a server somewhere.
I know.
On the cloud.
It's out there in the cloud somewhere. But as far as I know, the suit was filed back in 2019. As far as I know, it's still they've still been going through motions. I've seen some of the documentation. Some of the stuff that's come out of it, but that's where we're at so far. You may or may not remember about a year ago, Professor Craig Evans went on Sean McDowell's channel and gave this crazy interview where he told Sean McDowell that all these forgeries are actually authentic, and he can prove it. Which is nonsense.
Did you do a reaction video? You should.
I actually did.
Oh, you did?
You should check it out. It's on my channel.
Okay.
So it's there. Make sure you watch the reaction video. It's pretty good. So, and it's kind of crazy because Craig Evans used to be one of my teachers. And he in the entire interview, this is so crazy. I was in the documentary on Nova. I was, I've been interviewed by Science, by CNN, I was on CBS AM. I've done lots of media about this. It's no secret who I am.
Yeah.
Through this entire interview, Professor Evans wouldn't say my name. Not once. He just constantly identified me as first student. So
oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was yeah. Anyways.
Wow.
Yeah. So the but I brought that up because in that interview he also said that Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, who also bought fragments, is supposed to be filing a suit here sometime soon as well. So there's lots of legal wrangling taking place with this story. But
wow.
Thanks for having me on to come and talk about it.
This was fun.
Yeah, this is great. The audience too. Let us know if you like content like this, where we kind of go a bit deeper into the weeds of Bible scholarship. Let us know if you like this content and if you like this kind of stuff.
Leave a comment or two and like it and share.
So that's to your fundamental.
we also just wanted to remind everyone to don't forget to check out our other shows on Skeptic Haven. Thursdays, we have the Sunny Spot. Saturdays, the Global Atheists and Women Atheists Unload. And then Sundays, we have our call-in show, which is Let's Talk. And then, of course, Tuesday nights, you can find me and David here on Secular Soapbox. We also want to thank our patrons. We have Eric
Thanks,
Ozols.
patrons.
Yes, we can't do it without you. Ryan D. Murphy, Dan D, Michael Wiseman, Cindy Plaza, Sunny Shell, Aaron Coalson, who I saw in the chat, Phil Calderone, Amanda McLeod, and Logan Fisher. Thank you so much. And if you would like to support us, you can go to patreon.com/skeptichaven. Yeah, so thank you so much, Dr. Kipp, for being here. This was honestly so much fun. Yes, whatever you want.
Can I plug?
Yes, I was going to say.
something?
But I wasn't going to finish.
All right.
Hey, tell us what you can find.
Sorry. I'm just so excited because I've got something big.
Oh,
It's
yes.
big.
Tell us.
I'll save that. I've got a couple of it. So I'm going to be on with my friend Tyler Vela. This isn't the big thing, but I'm going to be on with my friend Tyler Vela tomorrow on his channel discussing a recent video that the Godless Engineer made about me. Apparently, he's So I'm doing that tomorrow. I'm going to be on the Data Over Dogma podcast in the near future. I'm recording on Thursday. That's Dan McClellan's podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, Dan and Dan. Although Dan is such a dick, and the other Dan's great.
And this leads me.
Okay.
This leads me to the big one, guys. So and this is now confirmed. So let me know if you can see it. Can everybody see it?
Yes. Yep. Ooh.
All right. So Dr. Jennifer Bird, Dr. Joshua Bowen, myself, Dr. Dan McClellan, Dr. Matt Monger are going to be doing a once a month live stream on my channel, launching not this Sunday, next Sunday, the 11th of February, 11 o'clock Pacific time.
Amazing.
So I'm excited.
That
just
is going to be, that's a great group.
It's so fun to hang out with those guys. So
yeah,
it's going to be wild.
That's the original slavery panel group.
Yes. Thank you, David.
It was the magic. It wasn't me. It was Josh. And then Josh said, "What's Josh said? Should I bring Kipp?" And I thought, "Yeah, let's do a panel." And then it went from, and then it was like spreading out, and yeah, it's great.
I think the chat is pretty excited. So, yes, thank you for announcing that. Yay!
Yay!
Everyone, go subscribe to Dr. Kipp's channel.
Oh, I'll have I will have a new video coming out in probably a week too. It's on my Patreon now, but it'll be
perfect.
Dr. Kipp, we also have got to book in our next time we
do
the case for critical scholarship. We're doing a whole review of the Case for Christ, and it's just been a laugh. It's been so fun. All right. Well, thanks guys for coming out.
And don't forget, David has a channel, Deep Drinks Podcast.
Oh, yes.
Everyone go. Yeah.
I've been very sick, but I haven't been there for a couple of weeks, but soon, guys.
Yeah.
So,
once he gets back from Sheol.
Yeah, I've been in Sheol this whole time.
Yes. And I have a channel too. So if you like to
sorry.
All right.
I should say that. And we're going to subscribe to Stay Steel's podcast. I'm still sick of all that.
Love you guys. Okay. And we'll be back
next
week. Okay. Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks, Dr. Kipp. Okay.
Bye.